Hello, everybody, and welcome to Spring Practice Report number 1 in this edition of Syracuse Sports, presented by Crouse Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for SU Athletics. You got Brent Axe, you got Emily Leiker, and Practice 1 in the books, Emily. Real football today. We saw at the Ensley Center, and a lot to go over here. We're going to give you some impressions from what we saw at practice. We're going to look at the roster and tell you what is notable there. We're going to hear from Fran Brown. We're going to hear from Kyle McCord and Dan Villari a little bit later on. We've got some great questions from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. And can you name a better time to be a Syracuse Sports Insider than this? You're getting insight from Emily and I from spring practice, all the transfer portal news and everything happening in college basketball. Lacrosse in full swing, a huge top 5 win for Syracuse over Duke this week. And just there's too much going on, Emily, but we're doing our best to keep you up to date and informed, and being a Syracuse Sports Insider is a great way to do that. Just text the word orange to 315-847-3895. I noticed an uptick today in our subscriptions on the first day of spring ball. So hello and welcome to our new Syracuse Sports Insiders. A couple great questions from you guys coming. So Emily, you and I went today and kind of put the focus on a couple things. Fran Brown and how he was going to run practice, and Kyle McCord. And what you can tell, nobody's in pads yet or anything, but this was our first look at the new quarterback. So let me start with you and what you saw from McCord, and we're going to hear from him coming up here. But, you had the boot in the offseason. People had some questions about McCord. How'd he look?
Yeah, we didn't see too much today. Like you mentioned, they're just in shorts and their shoulder pads and helmets right now. So weren't seeing any real scrimmage work or anything like that. Saw a couple drills, just some basic passing things. I think what really stood out to me was he has a very tight spiral. His balls, everything that he throws is like a laser. Just very hyper accurate. Did not see, at least in the part we were watching, anything kind of go astray or fall out of a receiver's hand. He was very mobile, at least in terms of passing. We didn't see him obviously run the ball or anything like that yet, just with what we were watching. But really, how perfect and beautiful his spiral was something that caught my eye immediately. You mentioned him being in the walking boot, and he was not wearing that. Obviously, he was full go at practice today. And I did clarify with him as we were chatting with him afterwards for the first time. He did confirm that it was due to his ankle injury that he suffered at the end of the last season with Ohio State, which I think we kind of figured but hadn't been explicitly stated. He did clarify that he did not have any sort of surgery or procedure on it, which is
interesting.
A good thing. That means it wasn't a break. It wasn't anything that needed to be surgically repaired. It was just kind of, he got out of the season, wanted to put a boot on so that by the time spring football came around, he would be 100%, which he said he's feeling. And so nothing seemingly to worry about on that front with him.
Interesting to see Nunzio Campanelli working in there now as the quarterback coach. Remember, McCord and Campanelli have history. It's a name that rolls off the tongue, along with Fran Brown and Jeff Nixon. There's history there. People say, well, how's McCord going to get acclimated and get used to his new receivers and a new team? This is the first quarterback in the transfer portal era that walks right in and is designated the starter. Remember, Garrett Schrader had to work his way into the lineup. Tommy DeVito was the starter then, but you knew who QB1 was. You're just watching the drills. Carlos Del Rio Wilson and Braden Davis were also out there. Walk-on A.J. Miller was welcomed onto the field by Coach Campanelli as well. But Emily, I think you said it well. I know it's day one and we haven't seen a scrimmage or anything. I got a little nervous because for a few minutes there, we were watching stretching.
Right.
And that's no good, but eventually we did see some real football there. So thankfully we got to see that. We were in there for about 20, 25 minutes or so watching practice today.
Go ahead.
I
was going to say, to your point about acclimation, one thing that we did hear consistently from McCord and Valari and then also Gadsden was that all of these new guys coming in, McCord especially, but also all of the other transfers, everyone gelled pretty much right away with who was here currently. And I don't know if that's just a product of it's a new team all around. You have a whole new coaching staff. And so everything feels a little bit more flexible and it's going to mesh, or if these are just guys that really get along with each other. I mean, McCord was the name that kept on getting brought up in that vein. Jackson Meeks and then Yazid Haynes. Those were all names that were thrown around in that. I was shocked by how quickly everyone was like, yeah, no, it really didn't take any time for us to mesh together. I mean, like, Gadsden did relent that, like, you know, he needs to get out there a little bit more once he's a little bit healthier and do some more reps with McCord to get on the level he was with Schrader. But this isn't a situation where they still feel like they have like significant chemistry to build among these guys. Like, it is already there. And I thought that was really interesting.
It was. McCord noted that. You're going to hear a clip from both him and Dan Villari on that coming up here on the podcast, guys. Speaking of which, I was not in the media scrum with OG. What kind of update did he have on his condition and where he's at in terms of practice?
Yeah, you know, he didn't give much more than we kind of found out in the past month, both from that video he did with the program and then the conversation I had with his dad that I wrote about. He wasn't like full go in practice today. He did have a helmet on and he was out there in more of a capacity than some of the other injured players. Like, we saw David Wollabaugh was still on his scooter from his injury last year.
But in helmet and uniform, by the way.
But in helmet and uniform, yes.
Out there as if like getting the feel of it kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes, right, which was interesting. Gadsden, you know, he still has another surgery at the end of this month. It sounds like he said that he has another surgery to go through, which to me read as he is getting the screws out in his foot. That was going to be an optional thing. And he said he's having another surgery. So that seems like that's going to be what he does. But yeah, he didn't have too much. It was unclear if he's expecting to like really participate in the spring game, but otherwise he said he's feeling good and things are on track, which we kind of knew.
So, Emily, I really focused on Fran Brown today. I wanted to know what kind of coach he was. How does he run his first practice? What's he doing? Let me say this. Energy is the word that pops to mind. He's all over the place. I thought a interesting detail was he carried around a microphone. It's almost like a microphone you can kind of put on your head if you need to be hands-free. And the whole facility would hear what he was saying, right? Sometimes it was instructions, go to this drill. Sometimes it was encouragement. Sometimes it was just, you know, simple football stuff. But he would take it off at times. And it's a good thing that he did from this standpoint. I know this is a podcast, Emily, but I will censor myself. There's a video going around out there today. I was standing right there when it happened. Instructions from Fran Brown to his defensive backs group, of course, his forte. Get bleeping violent was his instructions. And if you want to know the differences between Fran Brown and Dino Babers, there is a big one right there. Dino did not cuss. He did not appreciate cussing. It's not something that you would hear at his practices, at least from him. Fran certainly lets it fly, and he is passionate, and he is in there. Now, he worked a lot with the defensive backs today, but he was bouncing all over the place. I thought it was notable too, Emily. It's funny, I'm sitting there talking to former Syracuse running back Rob Drummond, and Rob is somebody that has been pretty vocal about the alumni connection wasn't there under Dino Babers, right? I'm literally talking to Rob about that. He said how great it was to feel welcomed at practice and being there. He was in that Zoom call this week that Fran Brown had with about 200 alums that were in that thing, by the way. Literally as it's happening, Fran Brown, to steal a phrase, darts over and says hello to Rob, and they catch up for a couple of minutes. And just those little things, Emily, that these alums did not feel in the previous administration are going to go a long, long way. But Fran was wearing the backwards Gate lacrosse hat, continuing to show support for Gary Gate and the lacrosse team. And, you know, like we said, huge win for them this week. So it's one practice. We'll see if this continues to be the case, but I get the feeling this is going to continue to be the case. He darts everywhere around practice, and he is a fired up coach for sure.
Right. You know, one of the things I like kind of immediately jotted down in my notes today upon walking in there was like, you hear about people like saying like there's a buzz in the building or like there's energy in the building. And like, I felt it. Like, I don't know, like I've ever felt a buzz like that before. Like, for one, there was tons of people in there. We had a bunch of recruits who had come to watch. There was staff from, I think we saw Hamilton College there. Is that who you said that was? We had the alums. obviously all of the press corps. This staff is so huge. There's so many staffers there. I was like, I leaned over to one of the other media people there today and was like, Jesus, there's so many people here on this field, and like you're trying to look and stuff like that. But like it really was just this buzz in the building, and whether that's just like first day of a new era, first day of spring practice, or if that's like how it's always going to feel in there, we'll see over the next couple weeks. But it was palpable, like the energy in the room, and
Dino kept it closer. Dino kept it closer to the vest. Like we said, alumni weren't really around, and it kind of felt like an exclusive club that you were in. Fran has a much more wide open door policy, and I think we're going to continue to see that. Maybe not every practice is going to be as stacked. Like you said, it was day one, right? But recruits that are going to be there, people that are welcomed, the staff is bigger. Just the energy of practice, it went in the time we were allowed to observe, it went at a pretty crisp pace. We'll see how that develops and as they go, because of course Dino Babers came in and it was the high octane offense, and by natural of how they played, it went that way. But really by the end, I guess we kind of got used to it, and obviously the offense really slowed down from that standpoint and what he wanted to do and install as a coach. But that, and there was just a buzz because everything's new, right? And there was anticipation, and we were just kind of everybody going in like the first day of school, like, oh, what are we going to see here today? But that was definitely true. I agree with that vibe, and I think everybody kind of felt it in there today.
The one thing that I did hear that we talked about and a couple other media people talked about that we will miss from the Dino tenure was ending practice with "I Feel Good," which I don't think they played any music. We had some music during,
but not a lot.
Music during stretching, but then it went silent, and you had the voice of God thing going on with Fran walking around with the mic, which was interesting. It caught me off guard at first. I was like, wait, where's that?
Somebody leave a mic on somewhere?
It was Fran. It was Fran.
So the roster came out today, Emily, just before practice. As you went through it, give us some numbers or anything else that you noticed that is notable here, because Fran has made it clear, and you asked him about this afterwards, that just by attrition of the transfer portal, making some cuts, making decisions about who's right for his team and his philosophy or not. Who is there? I guess the better question is, who is not there on day one?
Yeah, so outside of the guys that obviously announced they were in the transfer portal, and already landed at different schools or are still looking for other schools, and then Damien Alford, who we can talk about the answer Fran gave you a little bit more about that situation. There was 6 guys that were new to me, and then 2 guys that I had figured out were off the team and just kind of got confirmation of. So those were redshirt senior running back JJ Branham, redshirt freshman running back Muafak Parkman. That's a position where Fran has added a couple guys, notably Yasin Willis, who we heard some big things about and saw a lot of today. Redshirt junior wide receiver Kendall Long, redshirt sophomore defensive lineman Belazaire Bassett, redshirt senior linebacker Caleb Gilmore, and redshirt junior Austin Roon. Now, none of those guys. Oh, and then the 2 I had figured out: punter Max von Marburg, and then offensive lineman Austin Kawhi are also not with the team. Now, we don't know explicitly that any of these guys were like dismissed in the same manner that Alford was. Some of these guys might have just been like, hey, I'm going to focus on getting my degree because I know I'm not going to get playing time. Like, we don't really know. We'll try and reach out to these guys, and if they're interested in talking, they will, and we'll give them an opportunity to. None of them are particularly huge losses. I mean, Roon and Long were both on the depth chart last year, but kind of deep on the 2 deep and didn't have a lot of notable moments. So yeah, it's we knew it was coming. They're still over the scholarship limit by 1 at the moment. I think they're at 86 if I counted correctly, which I double checked, so I think I did. And that includes everyone that's there for spring ball, and then also the true freshmen in the class of 2024 who have already signed or verbally committed. So not all of those people are there yet, but there is almost certainly cuts coming at the end of practice again, and it's just a matter of where those come from, what position groups. Fran didn't want to say. He was like, everyone's competing here. I'm not going to get into that business, which fine, it was worth the ask anyway. We can make our own guesses about which position groups are going to have people cut or have people leave. And I think we have an idea of that. But yeah, that's where the roster is standing. The scholarship roster particularly is standing right now.
One thing in position groups that stood out today is, and shout out to Nate Mink, our fearless leader, for predicting this. Deuce Chestnut, who of course returned to the roster from LSU after transferring there, was working with the safeties today. So that was a notable position change that we saw out there. And I believe there was one more, which I'm not remembering at the cornerback position. Was it Hurd, who went from safety to cornerback?
Yeah, well, he's one of those guys that was coming in and was listed at defensive back. And you know, with defensive back, we always just have to sort who's going at safety and cornerback. But yeah, the Deuce switching to safety was surprising. I came in and told Nate that, and he was like, I don't remember calling that. And I'm like, someone did, and it wasn't me. I think it was you.
I think it was, yeah.
But yeah, we had talked about that, like kind of just offhandedly, but then someone actually tipped me off that there was someone that had switched positions, wouldn't give me a name, but gave me some context clues. And so when I got in today, I was like, oh, I got to go look and see where Deuce is playing. And sure enough, he was out there with Elijah Clark and Justin Barron.
As you noted, this was our first chance to ask Fran Brown about the Damien Alford situation. I did ask him why it didn't work out. And Fran said it was a mutual decision. He wishes him all the best. Sometimes people just wish for change. He said it wasn't anything to do with the quarterback or the teammates or anything. He said he just kind of wanted to move on. But I think it was notable, Emily, and we're going to get into these receivers, and we'll focus on them a lot more in a future Syracuse Sports spring practice report coming up here. But he said at the end of that statement, he says, we'll be fine. Alford was certainly a notable name. He had put his name in the portal in the past, had become a top target for Garrett Schrader. I feel like there's some that felt like all together he could have been more productive. Maybe he could have gotten the ball more. He's just a big target out there. He looks the part, but we're starting to see him round out. And I figured, especially when he came back, that'd be somebody that could work his way into what looks like to be a pretty deep and productive receiver room. But it was just interesting to hear Fran clarify that. When it first came out, it was a little unclear. Remember who said what and who made the decision, and there were some social media things going on. And from Fran's standpoint, that's what he said. It was a mutual decision, and now we have a little more clarity on that. And he is going to go in the portal, Alford is, when it opens on April the 16th. Yeah,
and I mean, we've tried getting in touch with Alford, just putting that out there, and he hasn't gone back or responded yet. So yeah, I mean, there's two sides to this story. Obviously, that's what Fran said, and obviously we know what was reported out back when it happened. But definitely, it was an interesting departure. But like you said, they seemingly have the wide receiver room, or seemingly have very high confidence in this wide receiver room. And
I really do.
Looking at the guys they have in there, I mean, we kind of knew that was going to happen, but I mean, Yazid Haynes and Jackson Meeks apparently are going to just light it up with McCord this season. So I'm excited to see that. Yeah.
Put them with OG, put them with Dan Villari, and you're starting to add up like how McCord took a look at this and said, you know what, I think I could be productive in this offense. Couple of questions from our Syracuse Sports Insiders, Emily, including from Michael W., who says, I love that the alums are more involved, referencing what we were talking about with Rob Drummond. How did the receivers look? Now, I'll be honest with you, I didn't see a lot of the receivers today, but I think we're going to answer your question, Michael, in what Dan Villari, Kyle McCord, and Fran Brown said. So we'll play that soundbite for you coming up in just a minute. I don't have a voicemail from Rock and Ron. I have been in touch with Rock and Ron saying voicemail is open for you anytime as spring practice goes along. So I can promise you in the course of the next month, we will hear the tremendous voice of Rock and Ron. But he did have a question for us, Emily, saying, how did the players look condition-wise? I've seen a few videos of their off-season workouts, and some of them looked like in-game condition. Now, funny you should ask, Ron, because as a part of the open accessibility we have now, with the assistant coaches, and today, Emily, we heard from the training staff and what they're putting into play. Anything that they said that jumped out to you?
I don't, we just kind of went over the basics of what they've done. We talked to the head trainer, Chad Smith, and then three of the assistants, Stack, Jordan, and Nick. And, it's just, I kind of asked about like what type of assessments they had done on players once they got in, it was all the usual body fat assessments, assessing what their diet is, assessing weight, assessing where they need to be in weight, all of that stuff. I think they didn't like rag on where any of these players were when they got in, but it did seem like there was a sentiment that there was a lot of work to do when they got into getting them into a just a better state, strength and conditioning wise. I honestly thought one of the more insightful answers we got about this, and this is granted, I have not been able to listen back to the strength and conditioning coaches yet. But during Oronde's session, I asked like, what's been different about working with this strength and conditioning staff? Because he has been able to do a decent amount of that work. And he said it's a lot different than what we used to be, not as much long distance running for now. We've still got the summer workouts. I've seen a big difference in a lot of the guys on the team weight wise and with muscle. And I was like, oh, have you bulked up? You feel like you're bulking up? And he's like, yeah, I think so from last year. So I don't know that the roster numbers are adjusted yet with like new weights or anything like that. I know one person we've talked about who physically looks different is LaQuinn Allen. Like
for sure. Yeah.
He has put on some major upper body strength and muscle mass up there. He's listed at the same weight, which, you know, how muscle mass and fat works. It's definitely possible that like he just switched out. He's still the same weight, but it's just more defined muscle now. But yeah, you know, they do look very much all in good shape in a way that we haven't seen in different years. And I think too, just the other thing that really stood out was obviously we've heard a lot from Fran about like mental toughness and, you know, dart and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, you talk about being mentally tough and how you train mental toughness and like, what does that mean? I don't remember, was it you that asked about the 6 a.m. practices and why they do that?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you want to talk about that answer?
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting.
I was going to add to that because we've seen some videos and they're out there at 6 o'clock in the morning, in the dark, in the cold, outside. And I've always wondered about that. Now, it's a convenience thing in one way because you're out there before class, right? That's a great time. Everybody can get together and you don't have any class conflicts, right? But I asked the guys, is there a science to it? Working out early in the morning. And Stack had a really good answer about that. That's just a great name, by the way, calling the guy Stack. That's fantastic. When he was saying, he referenced Mike Tyson and how Mike Tyson would work out at 4:30 in the morning because no one else was doing it. And that was his answer. Now he's saying it to the media, so now it's out there. And I would imagine there's some other programs that do this as well. But they really focused on the mental aspect of it. You're out there, it's dark, it's first thing in the morning, and there's a mental edge there that you're kind of beating everybody out there. And if you're working that hard, that early, getting a jump on things, like it builds a confidence within the team, right? And I don't want to get into a whole thing here because I'm not a licensed trainer or anything, but I've talked to some people that say, there is something about the way your body functions that if you get out there first thing in the morning and jolt yourself and work out, then it just kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day. And there are some advantages to working out that early. And yeah, I agree with what you said about, I think they wanted to be respectful of the prior staff, but you could tell they walked in and they're like, oh boy, we have got some work to do here to maintain what they want. You'll hear it from Fran coming up here shortly about the mental and physical toughness he wants this team to impart. And it was refreshing to get to hear those voices, not Dino Baber saying, here's what I want my coaching staff to do and not getting a chance to talk to the coaching staff, to hear from both Fran Brown and in this case today and his training staff. The word is refreshing and I appreciate the opportunity. And I think the fans are going to appreciate it as well as we go along.
And honestly, the coaches themselves seem to appreciate it too. I mean, I'm sure they're all just respectful as well. But like when they got done chatting with us, each of them was like, "Thank you so much for your time. Like, thanks for chatting," and stuff like that. Like, I think these coaches also find a lot of value. As frustrated as they may get by us sometimes in our difficult questions, I do think there is value for them, especially a lot of these younger guys that Fran has on staff that he wants to go on to bigger and better things than being position coaches, than being strength and conditioning coaches. It's important for them to have their voices heard and have other people at other jobs say, hey, I know how this guy runs his strength program. I've heard him talk about it publicly and stuff like that. So
for sure. Emily, let us hear from a couple of voices that we got a chance to catch up with today. And we'll start with the head coach and Fran Brown in his first media accessibility as head coach after a practice. Of course, his first one was his formal introduction, his press conference. We've heard some podcasts and some other interviews along the way here, but this was our first chance to catch with him today. And one thing that Fran brought up, I noted it a moment ago, let's play the bite. Mental and physical toughness is what he's looking for in spring.
Mental and physical toughness. That's what I want to see. For us to continue to be dark, being detailed, accountable, relentless, and tough. And for me to know this kid is committed, he cares, and I can trust him. That's what I'm looking for. Mental, physical toughness, making sure that our core goals and our core values dark, that we can all do that, and committed, care, and trust. Trying to get more guys on that side than being on the other side or wavering in the middle.
That message from the top down, Emily, is something we heard from other coaches, from players. That's the brand, right? Mm-hmm. Detailed, accountable, relentless, and tough. We're going to continue to hear from these guys. Here is Fran on some leaders that he saw out there today. Now, the question was framed in like, who are some of the returning players that you saw step up and lead? But he does go into not only returning players, but some of his new guys.
Yeah, I saw one. LeQuint is a leader. Got a chance to see that. I got a chance to see Derek McDonald. I think he's taking some steps that I think people will be surprised about. But Derek's a tough guy. And I talked to him yesterday about I want to see you take that step. Don't be afraid to, I don't want to talk, I want to do things. And I watched him do that today. Cinco, Elijah Clark, I thought he did a good job out there talking to the young guys, being there. And really just what's his name, John Ray Reed. He's always talking and doing things. And I'm on him too. And I seen when I challenged some guys, they were there. I watched Kyle McCord try to lead everybody. That's what he's been doing the whole time. But then you also seen Braden, when he got all of his reps, still being a leader at the QBs. And I think Coach Nuns is doing a good job with them. So being able to see those guys was good for me.
McDonald was an interesting choice there,
right.
Emily, in that there's some new voices in that room, some new talent in that room. But interesting that Fran is giving a returning player an opportunity to make a step forward.
Right. And I mean, McDonald's one of those guys that, like, the first season I was here, that 2022 season, he kind of got forced into that spot, and his spot in the linebacker room, which he's managed to retain since then, like out of necessity and due to injuries. And his rise in the past 2.5 years, I think, has been really interesting and intriguing. And now there's a new element to that with Fran asking him to be a little bit more of a leader. He's had some injury issues in the past. There was something that he battled last year, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, of that group, he was the most surprising. Like LeQuint, we heard all the time, especially near the end of the last season, about how much of a rallier he is and a rallying point for this team. Elijah Clark, that's another veteran that you'd expect. Kyle McCord, I hope would be acting like a leader, you expect. But I guess in that vein with Kyle, one of the interesting things that Fran said, and he had said on his appearance on the ESPN College Game Day podcast last week, was like, he sees kind of like the order of hierarchy of the team as being him, then the quarterback or quarterbacks, and then the rest of the assistant coaches. And he said that's a hierarchy that he's made sure everyone knows, like including his assistant coaching staff. Like he really values the position, I think, of quarterback, but also like just player leadership in a way that like I don't think every coach does, especially older coaches.
One more from Fran, and I asked him, speaking of which, what his message was for Kyle McCord and coming to Syracuse.
Come be you. Be who you were when I watched you play in Little League. I'm looking for that same guy who never lost in Little League, that done those same things. I'm thinking for him to just come and lead us, and we need a leader. We talk about the leadership of our team. It's the head football coach, quarterback, then the coaches, then all the rest of the players. And you're the quarterback of our team. We want to make sure, hey, lead us. You can't lead us being quiet, being timid. You got to lead us understanding and knowing when you make a mistake. See, when he threw that pass and it was off, then he come right back and he throw how he's supposed to throw. So, and him just being able to forget things, because it's football. The monotony of football, they go up and down throughout the whole time. And just being able to go with the flow of the game and you being able to keep everybody's composure at a certain level so we can make the plays when it's time for us to make plays. I mean, we got some good wideouts, like I told you guys earlier. I think Haynes is really good. Like he's fast and he's not even 100% because he just got his knee worked on and all. So he's finally back to be able to run like that. And so we'll be fine with that. When you got guys to throw the ball to, it makes the quarterback feel a little better also.
There you go. There's that hierarchy that you were mentioning that Fran went through in that soundbite. To Kyle McCord we go. And speaking of being a leader, how does he plan on being one at Syracuse, walking in as a transfer and a day one starter?
It's been really good. Obviously, this is my 4th year of college football, and I've had the privilege to be around some really good players, CJ Stroud, obviously, and taking the backseat to him for 2 years, seeing how he ran the team, and obviously the success that he's having now, I think, is a large part due to his leadership. All the guys really buy into what he's saying and what he does. So just trying to take that and put it in my game. I know how important it is to be a vocal guy, especially at quarterback. So that's really one of the key emphasis since I've been here, just to kind of step into that role.
One more from Kyle McCord here, Emily, just kind of reiterating our first chance to really speak with him and just reminding of why he picked Syracuse in the portal process.
I think it's the people more than anything. Obviously, I've known Coach Brown, Coach Nixon, Coach Nuns forever, and then the players too. I think there's a great team around me, and it just on my visit it felt right, it felt good, so it was really a no doubt decision.
Fran Brown said it. You're going to hear Dan Villari say it in a moment here. This is a challenge, Emily, for a transfer to come right in and establish himself as a leader. You noted it earlier that they seem to have formed an early bond here. They've spent a lot of time together already in just a few months that this has come together. They'll certainly do it after spring ball as well with the summer workouts here. But that's what I'm going to be most fascinated by, just leading right up until the first game against Ohio and through the season, is how you create something like this in a short period of time. It just feels like every rep matters, putting in the time matters, and that's the era we're in college sports today, both football and basketball, right, and other sports, about how you bring in all these new pieces and you kind of hope that they magnetize together.
Right. You have to make sure it's a good fit, and for whatever reason, again, maybe it's because it's a whole new staff, it's a whole new team, or maybe it's just because they naturally fit. These guys, these big players that are going to be expected to have big roles next year, have already found each other and found chemistry with each other.
Two more here. Dan Villari next up here. And speaking of the chemistry that we're talking about, he repeats what McCord has said and some other players said today, that he feels like it was instantaneous.
I was surprised when a lot of these guys came in. We all just kind of clicked right away. You kind of see people from afar and you're not sure how they're going to be, but everybody's just regular kids, and me and Kyle and, Jackson Meeks and Yazid Haynes, we all just clicked, and we're all cool, and I'm really liking our chemistry right now.
So there you go, Emily. We're starting to see a pattern here. Now, OG is not a full go here. He's a part of these workouts and is certainly going to be a top target when he's healthy, but these four names, Villari, OG, Zede Haynes, Jackson Meeks. And Meeks was noted by a couple of people today as a leader in that room, somebody who's been around. He's a senior. He's got some experience and somebody that's kind of taking command of things. So it's early and nobody's filling out the depth chart in pen quite yet. But it's interesting how these names keep repeating themselves, right?
Right. Yeah. There's a clear pattern, and we're going to talk to and about Haynes and Meeks here in the coming weeks, and we'll get to talk to the wide receiver coach, Ross Douglas. I was thinking Mike Johnson, who was going to be the second person I mentioned. We'll talk to him. He's now the tight ends coach, so he's got Gadsden and Villari. Then we'll talk to Ross Douglas, who has the wide receivers, which would be Haynes and Meeks, and we'll have a little bit more on those guys in the coming weeks.
And one more here from Villari. Emily, I know you remember this, but just to remind the fans, in the last press conference of the year, after Syracuse beats Wake Forest, they clinched a bowl game, Villari is up there on the podium, covered in ice packs, knowing that this regular season was over. Sure, they clinched a bowl game, but we knew that a new coach was in place. And we knew, not Fran Brown, but that they had fired Dino Babers and they were moving on. And the program needed a refresher. And Villari was very honest about some guys that had to commit themselves, the new direction that I'm paraphrasing here, but he was pretty blunt about things have to change here, right? And guys have to buy in. And maybe not everybody was as committed as they needed to be by his standards, right? So I asked him about that and if he sees that happening even here in the early.
That's exactly what we're doing here. Coach says how you do anything is how you do everything. And, everything's attention to detail. Every single thing we're doing is very intense. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
There you go. So Villari likes what he hears and sees so far. Anything you do is everything you do. That's an interesting quote there.
Yeah, and it's a little off topic, but we'll see if anyone unseats Dan Villari as best quote on this football team. He dominated that field last season, so it'll be fun getting to know these new guys and seeing who likes to tell a story, who has fun with the media. Garrett was always a little cheeky with us, and Kyle, we'll see if he grows into that or if he keeps it kind of cool like he did today. But it couldn't have asked for a better first day, I don't think.
It was an eventful first day. You mentioned the palpable buzz in the building. There's a palpable buzz with Syracuse fans who are just at a fever pitch here to get all the news, notes, information, and everything. And I just want to reiterate for everybody that's listening and watching today, become a Syracuse Sports Insider so you can send your questions and comments to the Syracuse Sports text line for Emily and I, what you want us to look out for at practice, what you want us to ask the players. We're going to be doing this pod about twice a week throughout spring practice. Our next one is Monday, right, Emily? Monday, the 25th. We've got another practice. Now, there's a practice Saturday, which we will both be at, and we'll be talking to defensive coordinator Elijah Robinson and taking a look at day 2 of practice. But the next football-specific pod will come your way Monday. So text the word orange to 315-847-3895 to become a Syracuse Sports Insider today. I sent our insiders video from practice, quotes from the media session, some of which you did not hear during the podcast, and exclusive content that only they will get, and the opportunity to interact with us and tell us what you want to hear when it comes to spring practice, lacrosse rolling on, what's going on in the transfer portal. A lot of people asking questions about Jerry McNamara's name got tied to the open job at Siena. What's going on there, right? These are the kind of things we talk about to each other on the Syracuse Sports text line. So become a Syracuse Sports Insider today. For now, I'm Brent Axe, Emily Leiker, syracuse.com. One down and many to go before the spring game on April the 20th, but we'll be here all throughout spring practice bringing you the very latest on Syracuse sports.